Hi, I'm Nick. um, I have a tiny little software company called Miniware, but that's not what I'm talking about today at all. And when Torian asked me if I would do a talk, I immediately was like, "What would people be interested in?" And he said, like, similar to the beginning of this, is like, 3 and 3 is trying to cover a lot of stuff. And he was like, anything that falls in the mix of like very professionally focused topics or explicitly not professional stuff. And I'm like, okay, so literally anything, right? And I started thinking about things that I would talk about and like going through them. And I realized like, hey, these are all silly side projects. Why don't I just like take it meta and talk generally about the practice of creating things for fun? And so that's kind of how I define like what a side project is it's like a project that involves your skills from your day job, but it's not a project for your day job, if that makes sense. It's something you're just doing extracurricular for fun. Sometimes these do happen at work. Like there's a such thing as a sanctioned professional side project, but it's the thing that your boss like lets you get away with when there's nothing else to do, because you want to just like tinker on something and maybe it ends up being, for them. But anyway, I'm digressing. Um, I've made a bunch of side projects. Here's some from last year. Some of them are publicly live, like this one. Can you see my mouse on stuff? Yeah. This is Tarot Terminal. It's a tarot reader app. Like if you want to get tarot cards, like your fortune told by an AI, you can go there. The one in the middle is this is actually from my wedding. My wife and I had a role-playing game, like a tabletop themed wedding, which was very awesome and silly, but none of the like website or like RSVP services worked the way I wanted to. And specifically, not only were the vibes like way off, but like the privacy policies were way off. So I was like, all right, I'll home cook something. And then this is just from a game that I'm working on with also my wife. Um, so suffice to say, I make a lot of random stuff, some of which are for general audiences, some of which are like literally for 1 or 2 people, and that's cool. Um, so I'm here to tell you generally that side projects are like always worth it. There's a few pitfalls for sure, and I'm going to point them out, but generally it's worth it. Let me get my mouse off your screen. um, the main reason is like you're going to learn a lot of stuff, both on purpose and by accident. And generally, getting good at something is just not a linear process. It starts out by being kind of bad. That's the first step, is sucking at something. And then it's generally follows this curve with anything that I've learned, is like you get a little momentum, you get some like quick dopamine early on, and you're like, this is fun. And then you're like, oh, there's a lot I don't know. And you climb that hill, and then suddenly, like 3 months in, you're like, oh my God, like I know so much more than my friends. I can do anything. Like, what's your idea, man? I'll build it in a week. You get like full hype mode, and then there's this really steep drop off, and that's what I think is generally known as tutorial hell. It's that stage where basically up until now you've been following instructions and you're able to do a lot of stuff, but suddenly you get to that point where the tutorials, which are written for general appeal and like beginners or intermediate people to do things that are common, now you're like, well, I need to do something specific, and there's no tutorial for this, or at least I can't find one. And it causes this existential crisis when the training wheels come off, because you're like, okay, suddenly there's no one here holding my hand. Was I only good enough to follow instructions, or can I actually do this by myself? So that's right there. It's a really steep drop, and it sucks. Luckily, there's a fix, but you have to be willing to go back to that stage of being bad at things, just different this time. And that's making your own stuff. It's the way to get past the dip. The current version of Tarot Terminal that's online now started literally just because I wanted to learn about large language models. That's like why I started tinkering on that. I took something that I was already interested in, which is tarot cards, and some stuff I was comfortable with, JavaScript, and then something I didn't know. And that's what I try to aim for, is like every project that I do, both professionally and like side stuff, is like try and learn one new thing, sometimes two. When you get to three new things on the project, three new technologies, three new techniques, different design aesthetic, you know, you start to add those things together, it gets too complicated and it's just hard to get into flow. So I recommend to one. Um, and just to put it out there, we talked about it a lot already, which is really cool. But not everything has to be designed as a product. If it's a side project, it doesn't have to be a side hustle. I think there's like a startupification of hobbies.
Hmm.
And it's been a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like to Chris's point earlier, like on the one hand, we have all kinds of sick tools geared towards individual people that make making stuff easier. That's awesome. On the flip side, most of the projects that you see published out in the world are out in the world because someone is trying to market it as a business endeavor, which creates like kind of a confirmation bias that everything has to be that way because that's what we see is things that are going for user signups or trying to get a subscription or make money or something. Um, but there's so many things being made out there, and you might not see them for a multitude of reasons. But the main one is that it's simply not being marketed at you, and that's okay. I have a ton of things that I've made that literally just exist on my computer. For example, I have like a whole app that I made so that I could split expenses easily every month with my wife. I made it when we were just dating, and we use it every month, and it's awesome because it makes something easy, and I just wanted that, so I made it. But it's literally not even been pushed to GitHub. So um, you can make things just because you want to, with any end goal in mind, even if that goal is like literally just to satisfy a weird itch that only you have and no one else cares about. What you do in the privacy of your home in your own spare time, at work or otherwise, just doesn't have to be made to collect capital. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Also, just like don't spend more upfront on side projects than the enjoyment you personally get out of it. I think a lot of people have this mindset that again they got from business examples, which is like I need to like spend money to make money. I need to invest in future returns. I'm saying screw that. Just buy a ticket for being entertained like right now. If it's more than you would spend on entertainment for the day or it's not fun, then it's not really worth it. For example, I have a little rule with myself now that I've had to make for my own safety, which is I'm not allowed to buy domain names until I design the entire landing page. Because I just had a stack of them that was bad. So that's a really good rule if you're a website person. And I kind of extend this philosophy to other things. I already kind of talked about learning too many new things at once, but like just general complexity. The longer you can keep things simple and small in a project, the easier it is to just keep tinkering on it and keep polishing. So keep the mental and the material budgets as low as you can. Unless, of course, your project does happen to be making money or is the money making kind, then of course you do what you want. But I recommend keeping the accounting crisp from day one. Know how much you've spent on it. I think a lot of people fuzz it at the beginning. They're like, this isn't real. Like, I'll spend $5 on a domain here and buy a font there for whatever. And you miss those things, but it is good to actually know for the future, like, okay, this project cost me this much, this cost me this much, so that you get an idea. And if the project's making money, make it pay for itself. Don't spend more than you make. Aim to break even. Breaking even's okay. You don't need to have like a 90% profit margin or whatever Y Combinator tells you is a good target, because screw those guys. Yeah. For me, stickers get a pass to all of these rules. It's my guilty pleasure. It's sort of like the prize that I give myself for shipping. They're cheap, they're easy to share, they're a way to remind yourself that you made something cool. I put like a clear case. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. I put a clear case on all of my laptops every time I get a new one and covered in stickers, and then I have them all hanging on my wall over there. And it's kind of like eras of my design career and dev career, is like seeing who I was working for, what I was making. And it's just really cool to have some of them actually be like, those are mine. So your trophies might not be stickers. Maybe you have something else entirely, but like having some sort of like visible to done list is really motivating when you're working on new stuff. Just being able to see all the stuff that you've actually been able to get done is really makes you feel good. But before you have things done, how do you pick what to do? How do you pick an idea to ship in the first place? I think that ideas are just like an excretion. It's just like a bodily function. You have 100 a day. Um, I think too many people just spend way too much fucking time waiting for like the right idea. And I'm here to prove to you that with my list of unstarted things, there will never be an idea so good that you'll instantly be granted every ounce of motivation that will get you through to this finish line, or like that is just markets itself, or like anything like that. You just pick your favorite one and do a little bit. Just start. You just start. Um, Literally, some of these have been on this list for over a decade. Like, and I'm, some of them will just never get done, and I'm comfortable with that. And like, these are like, most of these are like 3-4 page long, like they're fully fleshed out ideas, but the idea doesn't matter. It's about making the thing. And I used to really beat myself up about this. Like, I'd start a lot of projects. I had this big list that was getting bigger and bigger while I wasn't finishing things. And I've come to realize this is actually a pro, not a con. And I think a lot of, especially developers, feel like this, like, oh, I'm always starting new projects, never fucking ship the last one. If you have a friend who's like really into some form of media, like the one that like reads fantasy novels like one a day, or like loves anime, or watches a lot of Netflix like serious drama series or things like that, you'll find that they like, if you talk to them, they regularly drop them. Like, if they try something new and it's just not hitting, they're like not going to finish that season of TV. They're going to watch something else. Um, and like, that's fine. It's because they do a lot of it. They're forming taste. Leonardo da Vinci, right, is like maybe the patron saint of side projects. He didn't finish most things that he started in his life. And he was simply doing them for like the sake of curiosity and practice. And he got both of those, whether or not he finished the project. You can do that too. You get so much better, so much faster, simply by exposing yourself directly to a bunch of stuff and a bunch of trying. It's high quality practice, and it's kind of like the only actual shortcut for leveling up really quickly that actually exists. Everything else is bullshit. You just have to go practice and make it good practice. So get clay on the table. And what that means to me is like, you just have to start by giving yourself permission to make the really shitty version of the perfect thing in your head. If I have an idea, and the motivation and the time, like, I'll try and make a toy version as fast as possible. And I call it a toy. So I'm like, this isn't the real thing. I'm just going to make like the smallest version to see how it feels outside of my brain. Most of the time, that's where the project ends, is I make the toy, and it sits there, and maybe I come back to it or I don't. But I've gotten better and better at just getting things to be real. And the more that you practice that, the more likely it is that eventually you will make something like finished, meaning it can actually be used or shared. Taro Terminal, as an example, before the AI version, started out as a single file, really hacky, terrible Ruby script with no AI that I wrote on an airplane. And I'm now on my 4th or 5th like full rewrite of this app, and it's gotten better and better. And I've learned so much, and it's really fun. And now hundreds of people use it, which is crazy. But and for like long amounts of time, which I have to figure out. But it's kind of cool to have a pet project that you just kind of, it can be exhausting, and you feel like Sisyphus if you're like rebuilding the same thing over and over. But it's cool because you start to understand that thing really well, separate from its implementation. And so that it gives you a really good kind of test harness for your own creative work, where you can understand what's new, what's unique to the project, and what is just that project specifically. And like, most projects aren't on a linear schedule or even like a continuous one. It's all about kind of finding the loops to come back to stuff eventually, and like add something here and there until you feel like it's done. Everyone has cycles of motivation and creative block, or like professional depression, days where you just like don't want to look at the thing or work on the thing, or everybody has that for long periods regularly. If you can find out though, like which activities energize you or what's draining, you can kind of start to understand your own rhythm with this stuff, and you at least feel more in control of being able to ship. And you're less likely to burn yourself out by just like pushing through it. For me, coding is really energizing when I'm doing well, because I feel like that conceptual click of like I just solved a problem by automating it away forever is like the best drug ever. But like on the other hand, design and marketing, I love them, but they take a lot of juice out of my battery. Like I've learned that about myself, and so I know that I have kind of a limit before I trigger a burnout cycle. Um, there's also loops you can follow for actually making the thing. And I think that a lot of productivity advice out there is in the context, like for the context where you're collaborating with people or you're doing like a job or like a chore. There's not much out there about just getting things done for yourself with yourself. This is kind of my mental model for what I've found works for me. I think that it's a pretty general one that applies to a lot of stuff, but in essence, you have an idea and you just make it work. That's the shitty version. Then you make it pretty. And what I mean by that is like, you clean up your code, you name your layers, you make things organized, and you like trim the fat out until it's just like, okay, you've made it work. And now here's just the pieces that make it work. Then you make it good. And this is maybe more of like, you make it aesthetic. You make it something you're actually proud of. You polish the hell out of it. And then and only then, when you've gotten through those 3 steps, are you allowed to make it bigger, which of course restarts the loop, because now with more stuff, you have to make it work again. And then you have to make that pretty, and then you have to make that good. This also kind of works when you're coming back to projects that have been collecting dust. You come in, you pick something really small and achievable to get your momentum back. You make that work, and then you make it pretty, and then you make it good. And then you decide if you want to keep making this thing bigger, or you put it back on the shelf for a little bit until it comes back around, or not, and that's okay. If you get to the point where you want to keep working on something, you have the motivation, but you just don't know what to do next, then it's time for feedback. Seek people out who understand what you're working on or are capable of that, and get their take. If they're really critical, it's because they give a fuck about what you've made and what you spent time on. So it's a good thing. And you, at the end of the day, it's still your project. You get to decide what notes make it into the work or not. And sometimes the ideas that you get from this process have nothing to do with the feedback they actually delivered. It's just kind of a jolt of random that can get the juices flowing again. Your mom will always love it. Honestly, any family member, close friend, which means they might not actually be the best source of like real or actionable feedback. You really want to find people who will tell you what you don't see in the work. That being said, you should show it to them anyway, because you'll both feel really good about it. So what I'm generally saying here is do projects simply because the act of making them is fun, like the actual work is fun for you. Or rather, don't do it not for fun. You can quit whenever you want if it isn't fun. You can also drop it for a bit and come back when it starts being fun again. Because again, there's always going to be periods where it's like, oh, this is hard, or you have something else come up, or you've got to go get 5 freelance clients that you can pay rent, or like whatever it is. There are other things that will happen, and sometimes things need breaks, and that's okay. No one is stopping you from spending time on the things that you find interesting. You can just make things. And so that kind of brings us back to the original question, like why side project? Why make side projects? To practice, that's definitely one. To try a bunch of stuff, find out what you like and what you don't like, because it's fun to make things. But the really most important one is just to show yourself that you can. That's the talk.